Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast, the first one of 2025. Happens to be on the day that Congress counted the Electoral College votes. Congress does not, repeat after me, Congress does not certify anything in the election. They just count the votes, which they did today. Kamala Harris was presiding over this. And of course, as always, joining us is the Prince of Twitter, the Regent of RedState.com, the I don't even know what to say. I was going to say something like I don't know, something being with an S or a C of certification. I don't know. I mean, the count of counting. I don't know. Andrew Malcolm at AH Malcolm on Twitter.
I was certified senile. How about that?
No, I think that was Joe Biden. You're still with us. That was Joe Biden, was basically certified senile. So, today is January 6th. As we're recording, this is January 6th. And the great anticlimax took place in about 3.5 minutes, apparently. And it reminded me of the old joke, hey, this is going to be fun, wasn't it?
Yeah,
that's a naughty reference. So I'm not going to elaborate on what that actually referred to. But hey, this would be fun, wasn't it? Yeah, that's kind of how I felt about today.
Yeah, well, it was, and it was. The C-SPAN did a neat. They do this weekly look back, and they did a neat thing looking back at the other times that vice presidents have been forced to certify or to count the votes of their opponent to show that they were defeated. And once it was George H.W. Bush, and so he announced that he had won. Right. Yeah, it's a formality, but it's an important one. Formalities in democracies.
I agree. It's ceremonial. And there are certain ceremonial things. It's functional too, because you got to actually have some sort of official reading of the results, but it's not a certification. And there's lots of people, both in regular media and in independent media, that keep using certification. And that's not what Congress does, because the power to certify also inherently contains the power to not certify. And Congress does not have the power to not certify electoral.
Oh, see what I learned. This is why I come every week to this show. This is a great show now that Ed's here. I have to admit, I did say certify recently. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of my pet peeves, because we had this big fight over this 4 years ago, right? Yeah. Which was that Donald Trump thought that Mike Pence could refuse to certify the election. And Congress really they didn't have that authority then. And then Congress made it even more clear by rewriting the Electoral Count Act in 2022. And that was a bipartisan vote, because everybody wanted to avoid this in the future. So they made it really super clear. The vice president has a ceremonial role only in this. And Congress really only has a ceremonial role. They count the Electoral College votes. They're only on hand to settle the dispute for a state that sends 2 certified slates of electors that compete against each other. And that's happened once. It happened in 1876 in Florida. But that's really it. That's the only thing that they're there to resolve.
How did you cover that event in 1876, Ed?
Very carefully. We were still on internet dial-up at the time, so I had to get to,
Oh,
I had to type in.
Yeah, Ed's sharpened this year. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, last I heard, Trump won.
Yes.
Yeah.
Trump won. I mean, breaking news. Trump won. J.D. Vance won. Kamala Harris, to her credit, presided as she's supposed to do over the joint session that counts the votes from the Electoral College, not certifies them. And she, I believe, well, first off, other vice presidents have found themselves in the unpleasant position of counting the Electoral College votes for an election that they themselves lost, right? Richard Nixon in 1960, Al Gore in 2000, And my understanding, and I thought I had the data on this, and then I couldn't find it, is that Hubert Humphrey actually didn't do it in 1969. He decided he passed, and so the Senate President pro tempore, which is the most senior person in the majority caucus, handled that in 1969. Now, I don't have I couldn't find the citation for that. My understanding is that Hubert Humphrey did, in part because Hubert Humphrey was suffering from depression at the time. It was not a good year for Hubert Humphrey.
No.
And he was dealing with that. And I think they just decided that we'll let the senator deal with that. And but
he bounced back in 92. Is it 92? Oh no, I'm sorry. In 72.
Yes.
I covered him when he made a half-hearted attempt to come back, and I went to his. He took a weekend off from campaigning, and I promised him that I wouldn't bother him if he would talk with me on Monday. So he agreed. So I went to his house. He was the neatest guy. He was really very pleasant. And they had a little pool in back of the house outside of Minneapolis. And he said, well, I'll go swimming for the photographer. And he came out, and Muriel was sitting there. And she said, oh, you're not going to wear those old baggy trunks. Just like every wife would say.
Exactly.
So then he jumped in the pool, cannonball in the pool, and then he pulled himself up on the diving board for a picture with his chin on the end of the diving board. So he was a very pleasant guy, and I was sorry he left the way he did.
Well, look, I mean, you're right. He did bounce back. I mean, he was suffering from depression, and then he bounced back. I think you're right about being a half-hearted attempt, but he actually, I think, made it to. I think that was an open convention that year. McGovern, I think, ended up having to win that at the convention. I don't think he actually won a majority outright during the primaries. But and then of course McGovern went on. McGovern probably had better reason to be depressed after the 1972 election.
Boy, what a disaster! I went and wrote about his hometown, and in South Dakota. And so I went to the library, and he had written a book. I don't remember what, on the environment or something. So I got the book, and I looked, and those are the days in the library. It wasn't digital, where you had to sign in the little card in the back of the book. You had to sign your name, and then they were stamped. And somebody, the name, I don't remember what it was, Albert Thomas or something. He signed it out, and the very next day he returned it. and I actually looked in the phone book, and I found him, and I called him up, and I said, boy, you didn't keep that book very long. He said, it was really boring. So I put that in the story.
Well, today was boring, right? I mean, that was okay. I'm good with boring. Boring suits me for these sort of ceremonial, function only sort of things that Congress does. They don't even take a vote on this. They just count the vote, and that's it. So there's no certification. Congress actually doesn't take any action other than just read the counting of the ballots on the floor, and proclaim the results, because the states certify elections, not Congress. So there you go. That's my pet peeve of the day. It's my January 6th peeve of the day.
That's a great. Now I got a New Year's resolution for next year, or in 4 years.
4 years from now. We'll be talking about it again 4 years from now. Yeah. But I mean, two things. One is that Kamala Harris actually fulfilled her duties, did so I would say pretty graciously. I don't have any complaints.
Then she made a statement afterwards, which I haven't read yet, but I don't know what she said in the statement.
Democracy prevails.
So in fact, Trump did not destroy democracy by being elected.
No, in fact, he did not.
Not yet.
Yeah. Democracy prevails. And uh, she also said this: the outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for. But hear me when I say the light of America's promise will always burn bright, Harris said. It's just, I don't know.
Well,
Okay.
it's burning, burning bright. The light on the shining city on the hill, whatever.
Whatever. Well, it's over. I'm happy that it's over.
Yeah, but not
And
soon
then
enough. Jesus.
not soon enough. And so, it's like that 4 minutes, I was just in total, I was in such suspense that I wasn't even aware that it had taken place
Yeah.
until I saw it on Twitter. ABC News had the clip.
And what a relief it was for you.
I was so relieved. I was so relieved that it was over with. And I am, because now we can just get down to business. Business being, the House of Representatives actually took office because a last minute sort of stupid revolt against Mike Johnson didn't pan out. And I think it's amusing to discuss why. I mean, this was on Friday, right? When the House Speaker vote, you had 3 Republicans that didn't want to vote for Mike Johnson. And so they held the vote open on the first ballot because Mike Johnson said, I'm going to win on the first ballot. And we're all like, I don't think that that's really going to be the case. So, Donald Trump is trying to tell people, knock it off, right? This is not the fight, right? The fight is coming with the agenda. The fight is not who gets to be in the chair.
Yeah.
Now, so you get to the end of the first ballot, or what we thought was the end of the first ballot, and Mike Johnson is 2 votes short of the outright majority he needs because the Democrats didn't vote present. I thought maybe the Democrats were just going to say, this is silly. We just need to get this over with and have 20 of them or so vote present and reduce the number for a majority down to where it didn't matter what Dwayne calls the knucklehead caucus did. But at any rate, you get down there and he's 2 votes short. There's 3 Republicans who didn't vote for him. And then we hear, well, they haven't actually announced the vote. So technically it's still open. And then the next thing was, Nancy Mace, Mike Johnson have moved 2 of these 3 guys, Ralph Norman and Justin Self, into the cloakroom. And what happened is that they had Donald Trump on the speakerphone.
Yeah.
Donald Trump said, stop being ridiculous. You're screwing this up. And suddenly they decided to come out and change their vote on that first ballot.
You know what's interesting? That is a good story. But to me, what's interesting is that Trump didn't go out to the media and say these guys ought to get in shape. He did it behind the scenes. And
yeah.
to me, that's I guess maybe I'm too hopeful, but that's a new Trump. That's a smarter, savvier president.
So I think that once he was in office last time, I think he tried doing that. And I think he got frustrated with it. I'm not surprised to see him doing it this way this time because, yes, I think if he had gone out and just gone on to Truth Social and said, these guys are idiots, knock it off. And he'd been on Truth Social, but only to endorse Mike Johnson and say, he's great. This is the guy I want to work with. Let's get behind him. Let's get past this. Let's get to work on the agenda. He did this 2 or 3 times in a couple of days prior to the speaker vote, right? But yes, I mean, and I think that this is indicative, right, of what it is that we're seeing as Trump is transitioning into office. I mean, right now, as we're talking right now, they're already scheduling the confirmation hearings for the cabinet officers, and I don't think that they were even close to that, 8 years ago. You got Pete Hegseth. John Thune is apparently telling Trump that Pete Hegseth has the votes to get confirmed as defense secretary, which kind of makes me believe that the Senate Republicans are basically just going to approve the entire set of nominees because I think Hegseth was probably the most controversial of them,
Yeah.
at least in the media. Um, and it's really pretty well organized this time around. It looks, and Donald Trump has got his people in place because of a vacuum of leadership in the White House right now. They're already starting to make decisions on which people are relying going forward. Um, while Joe Biden is playing around with, medals of freedom
Oh, isn't that awful? It's
for
just it,
George Soros.
the
George
basic.
Soros.
Yeah. So Joe Biden, who abandoned Americans in Afghanistan, gave the Presidential Medal of Freedom to George Soros, and he gave the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Hillary Clinton, who abandoned Americans in Benghazi.
Yeah.
It's just, oh, the only one in there that seemed valuable was maybe Michael J. Fox. And
I actually thought that was a good choice. I don't know that it would have been the Presidential Medal of Freedom, but that's the type of thing that presidents traditionally use these things for. I mean, the Presidential Medal of Freedom is basically, I mean, there was this episode of Star Trek in the original series, right? Okay. And they came, they were having trouble getting the series renewed. This is sort of a notorious thing with Star Trek, is that NBC kept wanting to cancel the series. And so they were apparently, in an effort to do some merchandising thing, Gene Roddenberry came to the writers and said, you need to write in this thing where Spock gets this medal. And William Shatner talks about it in his book, and they were all like, Leonard Nimoy wasn't happy about it. William Shatner wasn't happy about it. But Gene Roddenberry said, hey, we really need to do something here. Just trust me on this. And so they went along with it. And there is this one episode where he gets this, I forget what it's called. And it was this medal that, basically it's a promotional thing, right? And that's all this is. It's what it's turned into. I don't know that it was ever anything else, but certainly, what does Hillary Clinton need a Presidential Medal of Freedom for? What has she done to distinguish herself for it? Michael J. Fox has, whether you agree with him or not, has been fighting his entire life on behalf of people who have Parkinson's disease, as he himself has it. Now, I don't agree with his preferred policies to deal with that, because I have a real huge issue with embryonic stem cell research. But the guy's got guts, and the guy has really he's sacrificed a lot of himself to get the message out there. Totally get Michael J. Fox. Totally fine with that one. Hillary Clinton's gotten all the rewards that she ever needed or deserved from the career that she's had. I mean,
well, now she'll be able to write a book about getting the medal. Another book,
right? It'll be like her 5th or 6th book. Yeah, I mean, she's gotten tens of millions of dollars from book publishers. She was that enormous Clinton Foundation grift that was going on for years and years and years. These guys have been repaid. Okay, Bill Clinton's been repaid. Hillary Clinton's been repaid. I think Joe Biden himself got one from Barack Obama in 20.
He did. He did at the end. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was seen as sort of a, what do you call it?
Consolation
prize. It was a consolation prize because he convinced Biden not to run because it was Hillary Clinton's turn. So yeah, I mean, do you think Barack Obama is going to get the Presidential Freedom Award from Biden? I suspect not.
No, but it is. There's still 2 weeks for him to do something else vengeful.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how much more he can do with pardons and commutations. I know he's
not that, but he could put something in to make Trump take a stand against green energy or whatever. He did something about drilling, even though he already had.
Yeah, I mean, anything that Biden's doing right now is going to be pretty easily reversed, right?
I hope so.
Anything that presidents can do with the stroke of a pen can be undone with the stroke of a pen. especially if it's not been in place for very long. The one exception to that, we were talking about this earlier today, some friends of mine and I were, the one exception to that was DACA, right? The Dreamers program. And that's because by the time it got to Trump trying to dismantle it, it had been in place for several years. And the courts were saying, well, look, we have a whole hundreds of thousands of people who've relied on that. And you can't just simply end it, even though the courts were saying, yeah, it's actually not constitutional what was done here, but you have to tell us how you're going to unwind it. And they didn't have time to do that. I suspect in this term they're going to either unwind it, come up with a plan to actually unwind it, or they're just going to adopt it and adjust it to whatever their own needs are.
That was one of Trump's best phrases, was Americans are dreamers too.
I thought it was a great line. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and then he's, I have a post, it hasn't gone up at Hot Air yet, but I've already written it about Joe Biden telling reporters, basically, I've been around a lot longer than you, Sonny, and I've met all sorts of different people.
I've met more important people than what? Was it sons of bitches or something? Than
well, it was a
GD word.
It was a GD. I'll pull it up here in just a second.
No, that's okay. It's worthless. But
yeah.
It's just a sad way to go. He lost, he got thrown out, he lost. The best thing about the election for him is that he can say forever that he would have won.
Well, this is no different than Joe Biden's ever been. And this is the thing that really got me.
Yeah.
Annoyed, right?
That's a good point. Yeah.
Because he's been a nasty son of a bitch ever since he got into politics. He's always been a nasty son of a bitch. This is the guy who, if you in 1987 is captured on film trying to pick a fight with a guy who's disagreeing with him at some sort of event. I don't know if it was in a bar or whatever it was, and goes off on this huge rant about how much smarter he is than this guy. My IQ is higher than yours. I got this, I got that. And it was a whole string of lies that he was throwing out there, which was just as bad, if not worse, than the fact that he had plagiarized his speeches from Neil Kinnock, right? Talking about his family background and as minors, which he lifted from a British Labour politician at the time, Neil Kinnock. It's the same type of thing that when he was in 2020, he was during the primaries in 2020. He was in Iowa, or it wasn't in Iowa, it was in New Hampshire. He was in New Hampshire, and a voter at one of the forums, right, one of these town halls, asked him to explain why they should be confident in him after he lost Iowa, and he calls her a lying dog-faced pony soldier, which to this day nobody knows what actually that means.
Yeah,
he's a nasty piece of work, and it's not the only times he's done this type of stuff. He called half of America garbage because they were supporting Donald Trump. That was just 2 months ago, a little over 2 months ago. He's just a nasty piece of work. And this is the same media.
He's a modern day deplorable.
Well, yeah. He's basically, he's worse than Hillary Clinton is on that score. Hillary Clinton at least narrowed it down to about half of Donald Trump's supporters. Joe Biden said, no, they're all garbage. And this is the same guy who the media, and this is coming, over the next couple of weeks is going to extol as Mr. Empathy, the guy who cares about people, who feels in his heart about people. And what he actually said over the weekend was, my being the oldest president, and this is to reporters who were there at the time, my being the oldest president, I know more world leaders than any one of you have ever met in your whole GD life. It's like, dude.
Well, to me, the classic was, remember after Afghanistan got so bollocksed up, and he had an interview that was supposed to clear it up with the sympathetic George Stephanopoulos. And Stephanopoulos asked him about the image of scores of Afghans clinging, so desperate to leave, and he wasn't doing an evacuation like in Saigon, clinging to the outside of airplanes and falling to their death. And Biden said, quote, That was 4 days ago. Mr. Empathy, as if they're a little less dead now that time has passed. I to me, that just sums up Joe Biden. That was 4 days ago. 5 words sums up Joe Biden.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we got a couple of things that because we're running out of time. I do want to touch on a couple of things, and this is about both Biden and Donald Trump, right? Thursday of last week, you have a piece up about Biden sparing 37 murderers to thwart Donald Trump. 37, but not the other 3.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, what? Morally, he's against the death penalty, unless it would be messy PR to pardon or to commute the sentences of the Boston bomber and 2 racial killers. It's just so fraudulently empty. It's just disgusting. And so I thought I would call him out. And obviously he's been chastened.
Well, I mean,
that was a joke.
Yeah, no. I mean, I get it, but I mean,
well, you didn't laugh, you turkey. Yeah, okay.
Sorry. No, but I mean, it's because I find this so frustrating. If he was, and I think that there's a legitimate position against the death penalty, but if you're legitimately against the death penalty, then
you're legitimately against the death penalty. Yeah,
you commute all 40, right? And it was because Dylan Roof. If he had commuted Dylan Roof's sentence, people on the left would have been shrieking over it, right? And the guy in Buffalo who, and I forget who the third one. Oh, Shohar Tsarnaev. And so he comes up with this stupid, well, I'm against the death penalty, except when it comes to hate crimes and terrorism. I've never met a murderer on death row that was there for a love crime. And I hate hate crime designation anyway.
Yeah.
It's a crime, right? It's but I mean that's not principled. That's political.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pathetic. So I felt I had to call him out.
You did, and you did a fine job of it. And your other column is as the big naysayers, and this is today. We're talking about January 6th. What will Trump say this time? And actually, he actually, not that I'm aware of, I don't think he's actually said much. I'm going to let you talk about your call.
No, and of course, and the next big day, of course, is the inauguration.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's going to have a lot to say on inauguration day.
He is, but when you look at what inaugural speeches are, the first one was George Washington, and it was 1,420 words, right?
Right.
And Donald Trump's was 1,433 words. So he said 13 more words than George Washington. So old GW set the tone for what inaugural speeches were supposed to be, not long ones. And by the way, I put this in as a historical nugget. I love history. William Henry Harrison gave the longest inaugural speech, was almost 2 hours. And he had the shortest presidency with 30 days.
Yeah. He got pneumonia for being out in the cold on March.
Exactly. He was giving his 2-hour inaugural speech in a rainstorm without a hat and without a jacket. And then he insisted as the gracious inaugural host, he went to receptions to welcome all the guests before he changed his wet woolen clothes. So he got a cold, then he got pneumonia, and the treatment for pneumonia in those days was bleeding. So it made his presidency even shorter.
He was, by the way, the oldest president that we'd ever elected as well.
That's right.
Ronald Reagan.
Yeah. Until then. Yeah. Exactly. And John Tyler was the first vice president to succeed to the presidency, the first of 9.
That's right.
4 by death. four by assassination, and one by resignation.
And the rest by natural
That's
causes.
right. Well, you four by death. Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah, yeah.
Yep. So yeah,
So
I mean, yeah,
yeah,
William.
poor guy. And I guess he was a good guy. You know, he was a Revolutionary War soldier and a farmer, and he was from Ohio, one of the many presidents from Ohio. So
Well,
uh, anyway,
yeah,
well,
and I bet you
um,
he didn't give a damn about the whole state of Michigan.
yeah, even then, you
Even
know,
then.
even then, trying to be a nice future first lady. I was Laura Bush's press secretary, and during the primary campaign, she spoke in Michigan, and she told a Rotary Club in Alpena or somewhere that by even the Midwest was important, and her press secretary was from Ohio, and she thought that would be a good thing, and the entire audience booed because Michigan and Ohio hate each other. I shouldn't say Michigan. I should say the state up north. Yeah,
The state up north. Yeah.
That's what they call the University of Ohio State.
Oh yeah.
The University up north. T T U TUUN tune.
Hmm.
So, but actually, that game. This is not about politics, but that game turned out to be a good one because it woke up Ohio State.
It did. It did. But yes, I that's a great story. The whole Ohio State Michigan um,
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
rivalry is one of the best in sport, maybe the best in sports. And there's a really good documentary about it. And if you're watching this and you haven't seen it, I think it might be ESPN or it could be HBO. In fact, now I'm thinking, I think it's HBO, and it is really worth watching. It's a lot of fun. Um, so if you're not familiar, you really want to do that.
And the other state is Pennsylvania, and was because it was the Cleveland Browns and the Pittsburgh Steelers, your
Yeah.
misbegotten team, and
Which misbegotten team is in the playoffs?
playoffs briefly, and
Probably.
yeah. And one time I wrote about how something about Pittsburgh, and I said that Pittsburgh was populated by people who were trying to get to Ohio, but they were rejected and turned back. I guess you have to enjoy this. You have to enjoy
Yeah.
this.
I mean,
Yeah,
it's meant to be enjoyed.
yeah.
Nobody takes it super seriously. It's all supposed to be fun, right? So yeah, no, it's just,
Yeah, yeah.
um,
My wife, uh, our son played junior hockey in Ohio one season, and um, she's from New York, but she was blown away by the passion for Ohio State. I mean, they were in Cleveland, and and all the store everybody was wearing red on fall Saturdays in Cleveland because of Columbus was playing, and that stores had promotions and everything else. She was just taken aback. You don't get that excited about Hofstra.
no, probably not, or Kelsey Fullerton either.
Yeah.
By
For
the way,
the
I did look up because you had a really good column about this. You know, what will Donald Trump say on January 6th, right? Is he going to make a big argument about it? This is the only January 6th posting on True Social from Donald Trump that I see. And it says, Congress certifies our great election victory. A big moment in history, MAGA exclamation point. I didn't. They just
Well,
counted
see,
votes.
this is why you have to get in the administration. If you're not going to Ireland, if you're not going to the Vatican, you got to go to the White House.
You know who's going to the White House? Or, well, Foggy Bottom, really. But you know who's going into the administration is Tammy Bruce. Did you
Yeah, isn't that wonderful? I tweeted about
also?
that as soon as it happened. It's just wonderful.
I'm so happy for Tammy. She's
There's
awesome, and she'll be good in that role too.
and nobody misunderstands what Tammy Bruce has to say.
No, I'm actually very surprised. First off, I didn't realize that I'm not even sure she is based in Washington D.C., but apparently she's willing to go there. Um, but no, she's been great. We've been friends, online friends for a very long time, and I'm so happy for her that she's gotten a chance to do this. And I'm curious to see where else some of the new media people might end up in this administration. That to me is,
Yeah.
and from Marco Rubio, right? I'm actually impressed that Marco Rubio is reaching outside of the mainstream establishment media for voices to represent him at the State Department. Good for him. I'd like to see other cabinet members make similar decisions. So,
Yeah. Good point.
Pete Hegseth, getting back to Hegseth before we wrap things up. I wouldn't be surprised if, I don't know if they've already made these decisions or not. And maybe he's just going to get somebody from one of the services to do it, like John Kirby used to be before they moved him over to the White House, that sort of thing. But it would be a smart choice for Hegseth is John Hinderaker over at Powerline if he was willing to do it, because he and John had I've interviewed Pete on. I used to interview Pete on our show in Minnesota, the Northern Alliance Radio Network. But he and John talked a lot more than Pete did with Mitch and I, and so John would probably be a pretty good choice for that. I don't know if John would be willing to do it, but I'd like to see Pete do something like that too. So we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah.
I think that Pete playing all of his choices close to the vest at the moment until he gets confirmed, which should happen probably on January 20th or shortly thereafter. So
wouldn't that be interesting? Well, I look forward to the shakeup, and I look forward to the emotional trauma that the press corps will go through when they give some of the seats in the press room to new media.
Yeah, I mean, yes. And that I'm looking forward to as well. And I have to say that we have a seat in the press room. We don't get called on. Katie Pavlich is our town hall representative in the White House briefing room, and then SRN News has their own. Salem Radio News has their own White House correspondent too. So we've got a couple. As organizationally, we have a couple seats in that briefing room, but. I'd like to see that get spread out a little bit more, and for questions to actually go to those people. And the Associated Press can write down the answers to other people's questions for a while. I have no problem. All right, so we're just about at the end of this here. You got jokes of the week for us?
No, I'm not until I find out how 2025 is going. I got nothing funny about.
All right, well, I got one for you.
Okay.
I got one for you and for our viewers and listeners. All right, so here we go. So a police officer sees a car kind of speeding down the road and decides he's going to pull the car over. Pulls the car over and walks up to the car, and there's this little old lady behind the wheel, right? And she's maybe, I was going to say 62 because that's my age. No, she's a little older than that. And he asked to see her driver's license. Says, what's the rush? She said, well, I wasn't aware that I was going too fast, officer. I thought I was doing the speed limit. So he takes her driver's license and he runs the driver's license, and it comes back and says that she has a carry permit, for a firearm. So he goes back to the door and he says, I see that you have a carry permit. Do you have any firearms on you at the moment? She says, well, I do have a 22 in my purse. He goes, well, that's okay. And she said, well, I also have a 38 in the center console. He goes, well, I mean, that's okay. And she said, I have a 45 in the glove compartment. And he says, well, do you have anything else? She says, well, I've got a couple of shotguns in the trunk. He says, lady, what are you afraid of? And she looks back at him and with a sweet smile, and she says, not an effing thing. I told that to a friend of mine. At church. And he says, that sounds like a Texas joke. He said, it probably was. I didn't hear it.
Yeah, that's true.
but it
Yeah.
was probably a Texas joke originally. I heard it. I heard it without the that context. But so there you
Your
go.
your story reminded me of one that I think I already shared with you from Instagram, and it was a woman, and she said, "I finally got to see my doctor, and I showed him the rash on my bottom, but he just kept walking through Costco."
I remember you said that to me now. I remember. It's like, I know this is going someplace, and I can't quite remember what it was. Andrew and I love to send each other Instagram jokes, so
Yeah,
we're doing that
yeah.
constantly during the week, and then we forget them when we do that. We forget
That's
the.
right. That's right. That's
This is a
right.
rare moment because I got that joke. I got my joke from Instagram. You got your joke from Instagram.
There
So
we go. All
there you
right.
go.
So the world is complete. We started off the year just right.
Absolutely. Andrew Malcolm, the prince of Twitter, the regent of redstate.com, the immobiliare of Instagram.
Oh,
Immobiliare is basically real estate, by the way. It was just the first word that came into my mind.
yeah. That's from The Godfather. Yeah.
Yeah, Godfather Part 3, which is the Godfather movie that we will never mention again, which will never come up in polite conversation. All right. Andrew Malcolm, we're going to do this again next week.
Yep.
And by that time, we should start seeing some of the stuff coming through the committees in the Senate, and we should have some really interesting things to talk about.
Okay. That's great. We'll see you then. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Andrew.